Evelyn Sinclair never should have done it. She knew that the moment her trembling fingers pressed the crumpled $200 bill into the stranger's palm outside the Kingsley mansion gate. "Please," she whispered, "just pretend to be my boyfriend tonight." Inside, her relatives were still laughing, counting Thanksgiving gifts worth more than years of her wages, while someone asked too loudly why she was still poor, still unmarried, still the family's greatest disappointment. The stranger said nothing. He simply took the money, studied her face with eyes like gray steel, and followed her through the door. His coat was dark, his posture impossibly steady, and when he walked into that room full of wealth and cruelty, Evelyn felt something shift in the air. They mocked his plain appearance. They laughed even harder. Then Ronan Reed's bodyguard reached for his gun. The elderly butler, Harlan, dropped his gaze to the floor, and Ronan himself, the man engaged to Evelyn's cousin Clara, went pale as death when he recognized who was standing there, holding the servant girl's hand. The room didn't just go quiet, it went cold, because Barrett Hale, the most ruthless Mafia boss in New York, the man whose name silenced boardrooms and emptied streets, had just walked into a Thanksgiving dinner on the arm of a girl who had no idea she'd handed her last $200 to the devil himself. If you're already hooked, smash that like button. Share this with a friend who loves dark romance, and subscribe to follow this journey. What Evelyn doesn't realize is that the man she hired to save her from one nightmare is about to become a far more dangerous one. No one dared to breathe. The vast living room of the Kingsley mansion felt as if the air had been drained from it, leaving behind only a suffocating, crushing silence. Evelyn stood there, her hand still resting in the hand of the man she had just hired for $200. And she couldn't understand how everything had spun out of control so violently. Just seconds earlier, they had been laughing at him. Now they were trembling. Aunt Helena was the first to attempt to break the frozen atmosphere. She stepped forward, forcing a stiff smile onto her lips, as though greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in years, saying that it was an honor to welcome Mr. Hale into their humble home. Barrett didn't look at her. His cold gray gaze swept across the room, taking in every face, every reaction, every bead of sweat rolling down the foreheads of those who had been laughing the loudest moments ago. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and unhurried, as if each word had been carefully weighed. "Humble," he repeated, one corner of his mouth lifting slightly without the slightest trace of warmth. "I just witnessed how you treated my woman in this humble house." Ronan Reed stepped forward, trying to reclaim the posture of a successful businessman, even though his shoulders were still rigid with tension. "Hale, this is a family matter. I don't think it concerns you." Barrett turned his head toward Ronan, and Evelyn felt his grip tighten around her hand. Not possessive, but like a silent promise. "Reed," Barrett said his rival's name as if referring to an irritating insect. "You're standing in someone else's living room talking about family matters while your fiancé is sitting right there, and yet you haven't taken your eyes off the girl standing beside me all evening. So who exactly needs to explain themselves here?" Clara, seated on the sofa with her engagement ring glittering under the lights, began to sense that something was wrong. She looked at Ronan, then at Evelyn, then back at Ronan, suspicion seeping into her gaze like a spreading oil stain. Barrett guided Evelyn to the only empty chair in the room, the chair she had never once been allowed to sit in during the years she had lived under this roof, a silent witness to her years of hardship. He pulled it out, waited for her to sit, then stood directly behind her like an unyielding wall. "Dinner will continue," he said, not as a suggestion, but as an order. And this time she sits at the table. No one objected. Aunt Helena signaled the servants to bring out additional dishes. Clara bit her lip and swallowed her anger. Pastor Harlan, who moments earlier had been loudly judging Evelyn for her poverty and loneliness, now bowed his head to recite a prayer as if he hadn't spoken at all. The meal dragged on in oppressive silence. Evelyn could barely swallow a single bite. She could feel the warmth of the man standing behind her, and it both soothed her and terrified her. She didn't know what he wanted. She didn't know why he was here. She only knew that her life had just veered onto a path she couldn't control. When dinner ended, Barrett motioned for Evelyn to follow him into the hallway. She obeyed, her steps unsteady. Once they were far enough away that no one could hear them, she finally asked the question that had been burning inside her all evening. "Why are you here? Why were you standing outside this house?" Barrett looked at her, and for the first time, there was something in his steel gray eyes other than cold detachment. "I've been watching Ronan Reed. He's running a money laundering operation through shell companies, and one of his transaction points is right near this estate. I came tonight to observe, not to go inside." Evelyn's heart seemed to stop. So hiring you was an accident. Barrett tilted his head, studying her face as if trying to solve a complicated puzzle. "An accident?" he repeated slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe the universe has its own way of arranging things. What matters is that now Ronan knows you belong to me, and he won't dare touch what belongs to me." Evelyn wanted to protest that she didn't belong to anyone, but looking into those cold eyes, watching how that entire room of power had trembled in his presence, she realized she had stepped into a completely different world, a world where danger and protection were tightly entwined, where the line between salvation and captivity was as thin as a strand of hair, and she didn't know whether she had just been set free or had walked straight into a new kind of cage. Evelyn Sinclair learned how to make herself invisible very early in life. Not physically, although hunger sometimes left her so thin it felt as if people could see right through her, but emotionally. She learned to lower her eyes when adults spoke, to step aside when food was served, to smile in a way that said, "Thank you for tolerating my existence." By a young age, she had already understood a painful truth. In Aunt Helena's house, love was conditional, and a person's worth was measured by what they could provide. But before she learned that lesson, Evelyn had lived a different life. She remembered the scent of apple pies her mother baked every Sunday morning. She remembered her father's laughter as he lifted her onto his shoulders and ran across the backyard of their small suburban home outside Boston. She remembered the feeling of safety, warmth, of being loved without conditions. Then it all vanished in a single night. Evelyn was young when fire swallowed her home. She remembered it with cruel clarity, the sound of shattering glass, the sting of smoke burning her eyes, her father's hands pushing her through the first-floor window as flames began licking the staircase. "Jump, sweetheart. I'll be right behind you." Those were the last words he ever said to her. Evelyn jumped, her left shoulder slamming into a burning piece of wood that fell from the porch roof. She screamed, rolled across the lawn to extinguish the flames clinging to her nightgown. When she looked up, the window where her father had stood was already consumed by fire. She screamed for her parents until her throat tore raw. No one answered. The fire trucks arrived too late. They found her parents' bodies in the upstairs bedroom, where the investigation report later claimed an electrical malfunction had sparked the tragedy. Evelyn didn't believe it. She was young, but she remembered the lights working perfectly before she went to bed. She remembered strange noises near the back door. She remembered her father being tense before that night, whispering into the phone with a worried expression, but no one listened to a traumatized child. Aunt Helena appeared after the funeral. She was her mother's sister, a woman Evelyn had only met a handful of times because the sisters were never close. She arrived with guardianship papers already prepared and a gentle smile for the local reporters' cameras. "I'll take care of my poor niece. That's what family does." It took time for Evelyn to understand the truth. Her parents had a substantial life insurance policy, enough to support a child until adulthood. The money was transferred to the legal guardian, and Aunt Helena collected every dollar. Instead of using it for Evelyn, she bought a mansion on Long Island, luxury cars, and sent Clara to the most expensive private schools in the area. Evelyn slept in a cramped attic room, wore Clara's discarded clothes, and began doing housework. She cleaned, washed, cooked, and bowed her head every time Aunt Helena reminded her of the generosity of being taken in. "Do you know what people would think if they knew about that night?" Aunt Helena asked her after she dared to ask for money for textbooks. The only daughter who survived the fire, the daughter who, according to some people, might have done something that caused her parents' deaths. Evelyn froze when she heard those words. "I didn't do anything. I was asleep." Aunt Helena smiled, the kind of smile Evelyn would learn to fear afterward. "I know, but others don't. And if you want me to keep quiet about what really happened that night, you'd better learn how to be more grateful." From that moment on, Evelyn never asked for anything again. She worked. She stayed silent. She existed like a shadow in the very house built with her parents' money. The burn scar on her left shoulder was never properly treated, leaving behind a twisted, ugly patch of skin that Clara never stopped mocking. Years. Years Evelyn lived as an unpaid servant, controlled by fear and shame over a crime she never committed. She graduated high school at the top of her class but wasn't allowed to attend college. She worked at diners and bars, handing over nearly all her wages to her aunt as repayment for being raised. She dreamed of escaping, but never had enough money or enough courage until that night, until she placed her final $200 into the hand of a stranger and accidentally dragged the devil himself into her life. Standing in the hallway of the Kingsley mansion, looking into the cold, gray eyes of Barrett Hale, Evelyn wondered whether this was freedom or merely another form of captivity. But at least, for the first time, she had someone looking at her and seeing a human being rather than a burden. After that Thanksgiving night, Barrett Hale left without making any promises. He only placed a business card into Evelyn's hand, the front bearing his name in black letters on a simple white background, the back marked by a string of phone numbers written by hand. "If anything happens, call me anytime." Evelyn hid the card inside the lining of her old handbag, a place Aunt Helena would never think to search. She didn't know whether she would ever use it. She only knew that for the first time in her life, she had a backup choice, an emergency exit, even if she had no idea where it might lead. But if Evelyn thought everything would return to normal after that night, she was wrong. Everything changed, just not in the way she expected. Ronan Reed began appearing at the Kingsley mansion far more often. Before, he only came to see Clara, bringing flowers and chocolates and honeyed words. Now, he came almost every day, with excuses that grew thinner each time. He wanted to discuss wedding plans with Aunt Helena. He needed a quiet place to work. He was just passing by, but his eyes never searched for Clara first. They always swept the room until they found Evelyn. The first time Evelyn realized something was wrong was when she was washing dishes in the kitchen. Ronan walked in to get a glass of water, but instead of going straight to the sink on the other side, he circled behind her, too close. His hand brushed her back as he reached for a glass on the shelf, even though it was placed where he could have taken it without touching her at all. Evelyn froze, feeling as if 1,000 ants were crawling along her spine. "Sorry," Ronan said, but he didn't move away. His voice dropped, almost a whisper near her ear. "You look beautiful when you do housework." She didn't answer. She didn't dare. She stayed still until he finally left, his hand grazing her hip like a reminder that he could touch her whenever he wanted. In the days that followed, the touches became more frequent. A hand on her shoulder when she cleared the table, fingers brushing her arm when she poured tea, a stare that lingered too long when she bent down to pick something up. Ronan never crossed the line in front of others, but he always found ways to be alone with her, always found ways to make her understand that his attention was not accidental. Clara didn't see it, or she chose not to see it. Evelyn wasn't sure which was worse. Once she tried to tell Clara, tried to warn her that her fiancé couldn't be trusted. But Clara only scoffed, her eyes cold as ice. "Who do you think you are?" Clara asked with open contempt. An ugly little maid covered in scars, and you think Ronan would look at you. Don't flatter yourself, and don't try to sabotage my happiness." Evelyn said nothing more. She was used to not being believed, not being heard, not being valued. Ronan invited the whole family to a party at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan. Evelyn didn't want to go, but Aunt Helena ordered her to. "You're going to serve. Don't think that Hale gives you any status." At the restaurant, Evelyn tried to stay as far from Ronan as possible, but when she stepped into the hallway to find the restroom, he was already waiting there. Ronan blocked her path, one hand braced against the wall, his tall frame forming a barrier that trapped her in the corner. "Do you think Hale will protect you?" Ronan asked, his breath heavy with the smell of wine and threat. "He's just a stray dog, and you're what I want, and what I want, I get." Evelyn trembled, her back pressed to the wall, searching for an escape that didn't exist. She opened her mouth to scream when a voice cut through the air. "Reed!" The voice was cold as ice, deep as thunder. Ronan turned, and Evelyn saw Barrett Hale standing at the end of the hallway, his steel gray eyes burning with something more dangerous than anger. It was the promise of violence. "I think you're trying to touch something that doesn't belong to you." Barrett stepped forward, each stride slow and deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. Ronan backed away, trying to keep his composure, but his voice shook. "She doesn't belong to anyone. She's just a servant." Barrett stopped inches from him, and when he spoke, his voice was so soft it was almost a whisper. "This is my final warning. If I see you touch her again, if I hear that you go near her again, I won't kill you right away. I'll take everything you love first, every business, every bank account, every family member, and when you have nothing left, when you're on your knees begging for death, that's when I'll let you go." Ronan swallowed, his face pale as a corpse. He said nothing more, only turned and left in a hurry. Barrett turned to Evelyn, and for a brief moment, she saw his steel eyes soften just a little. "Are you all right?" Evelyn nodded, even though her heart was still racing. "You were watching me." "I protect what belongs to me," he replied simply, as if that explained everything. And from that night on, Evelyn knew that whether she wanted it or not, her life was now bound to the orbit of Barrett Hale. After that night at the restaurant, everything changed in ways even worse than Evelyn could have imagined. Aunt Helena summoned her into the study the very next morning, her face cold as stone, her eyes burning with something caught between fury and greed. "Do you know what you've done?" Aunt Helena hissed through clenched teeth. "You turned this family into a joke in front of Ronan Reed, in front of that Hale man." Evelyn wanted to explain that she had done nothing wrong, that she was only trying to protect herself, but she knew her words wouldn't be heard. They never were. "From now on, you are not leaving this house," Aunt Helena declared as if reading out a sentence. "No work, no going out, no phone calls to anyone. You will stay here until I decide what to do with you." "But my jobs," Evelyn tried to protest. "They'll fire me." "I've already called the diner and the bar," Aunt Helena cut in sharply. "You don't work there anymore, and whatever money you have left, give it to me. Consider it partial repayment for all the years I raised you." Evelyn's heart plunged into an abyss. That money was everything she had, every dollar saved from late-night shifts, from meals she skipped, from things she never allowed herself to buy. She had planned to use it to escape someday. Now even that small dream was being taken from her. Evelyn handed the money to her aunt with trembling hands. Aunt Helena counted every bill, making no effort to hide the satisfaction on her face, then dismissed Evelyn as one would chase away a stray dog that had just been punished. The days that followed blurred into a never-ending nightmare. Evelyn was confined to the house, allowed to leave her room only to do chores. Her phone was confiscated. The attic door was locked from the outside every night. Clara passed by her with a triumphant smile, occasionally tossing out cruel remarks about how Evelyn had brought this upon herself. Aunt Helena issued orders coldly, treating her like a tool rather than a human being. The only person who showed Evelyn any kindness was Harlan, the elderly butler who had served the Kingsley family. Harlan never looked at her with the contempt the others did. He always called her Miss Evelyn instead of addressing her like nothing. During these days of confinement, it was Harlan who secretly brought leftover food up to her room when Aunt Helena forgot to give her dinner, who left a glass of warm water outside her door every morning, who was the only one who made Evelyn feel she was still human. One night, Harlan knocked on Evelyn's door after the house had fallen asleep. His wrinkled face was tight with worry, his eyes darting around as if afraid someone was watching. "Miss Evelyn, I need to tell you something," Harlan whispered, his voice shaking. "I shouldn't say this, but my conscience won't let me stay silent." Evelyn let him in, her heart pounding wildly. She knew that anything forcing Harlan to take such a risk couldn't be good news. "I accidentally overheard a conversation between Mrs. Helena and Mr. Reed," Harlan said, his old hands clasped tightly together. Mr. Reed offered her a large sum of money, a very large sum. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her body. "For what?" she asked, even though deep down she already knew the answer. Harlan looked at her with eyes full of pity and shame on behalf of the family he served. "To own you," Harlan said, each word falling like a heavy stone. "Mr. Reed said he would cover all expenses, take you away from here, remove the burden Mrs. Helena has carried." Evelyn felt sick. She wanted to believe that no matter how cruel Aunt Helena was, she wouldn't sell her own niece. But she knew her aunt better than anyone. She knew that in Aunt Helena's eyes, blood meant nothing compared to money. "What did she say?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Harlan shook his head, his expression full of pain. "She didn't refuse. She said she would consider it. She asked if Mr. Reed could pay more because you've caused too much trouble with that Hale man." Evelyn's world collapsed completely. She was used to being abused, exploited, dismissed. But being sold like property was something she had never imagined. Harlan placed a wrinkled hand on her shoulder. "You have to leave this place. Miss Evelyn, I don't know where you'll go, but you can't stay here. If Mrs. Helena agrees to Mr. Reed's offer, I can't bear to think about what will happen to you." Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. She thought of the business card hidden inside her old handbag, of the handwritten phone number, of the cold, gray eyes that weren't entirely without mercy. "If anything happens, call me, anytime." Maybe it was time for her to call. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay on the narrow bed in the attic room, staring at the peeling ceiling while her mind spun with everything Harlan had revealed. Sold. She was about to be sold like an object. Years of life. And this was all she was worth in her family's eyes. A sum of money, a transaction, a convenient way to dispose of a burden. In the morning, when the entire mansion had sunk into silence, the old phone Harlan had secretly given her suddenly vibrated, an unknown number. Evelyn hesitated for a second, then answered. "You know who this is." The voice was low and cold, but she recognized it instantly. Barrett Hale. "How do you have this number?" she asked, her heart pounding wildly. "I have my sources," Barrett replied curtly. "Listen, I don't have much time. Ronan Reed has just finalized the deal with your aunt. The exchange will happen. You need to get out of there right now." The blood in Evelyn's veins seemed to freeze. The deal was done, not under consideration anymore. Aunt Helena had agreed to sell her. "I don't have any money," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "I have nowhere to go." "You have me," Barrett replied, and there was something in his voice that made her want to believe him. "Leave the house, go east. There will be a black car waiting. My driver will take you somewhere safe." "Why are you helping me?" Evelyn asked the question that had haunted her. "I have my reasons," Barrett said, "but this isn't the time to explain. You have time." The call ended. Evelyn didn't hesitate again. She gathered a few necessities into her old backpack, the few things that truly belonged to her in this house. A photograph of her parents, a few changes of clothes, Barrett's business card. She opened the attic window, the one she had learned how to unlock during nights when she needed fresh air to breathe. The roof was slick with night dew, but Evelyn was used to it. She climbed down carefully, gripping the gutter, then dropped onto the grass behind the house. Her heart thundered as she ran through the dark garden toward the back gate. Freedom, for the first time in her life. She was running toward freedom. But freedom didn't come that easily. Evelyn had been outside the back gate for less than a minute when two dark figures emerged from the shadows. Ronan's bodyguards. She recognized them immediately. The men who had stood like statues during the Thanksgiving dinner. The men who had trembled before Barrett but were now looking at her with predatory eyes. "Where are you rushing off to, little girl?" one of them said mockingly. "The boss is waiting for you." Evelyn turned to run, but a rough hand seized her arm and yanked her back. She screamed and struggled, but the other man clamped a cloth reeking of chemicals over her mouth. "Don't make this difficult," he hissed into her ear. "Mr. Reed doesn't like damaged goods." They dragged her toward a car parked in the darkness, and Evelyn knew that if she got into that vehicle, she would never escape in her desperation. As one man opened the car door and the other loosened his grip for just a second, Evelyn bit down hard on the hand covering her mouth. The bodyguard shouted and instinctively pulled back. And Evelyn used that instant to yank the phone from her pocket and redial the last number. She didn't have time to say a word. The bodyguard snatched the phone, slammed it to the ground, and crushed it under his boot. But Evelyn had heard the familiar voice on the other end for the briefest moment, and she prayed that Barrett Hale had heard her scream before the line went dead, before darkness swallowed her completely. The car sped through the darkness, and Evelyn lay curled up in the back seat, her hands bound, her mouth gagged, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't know where they were taking her, only that with every passing second, she was being dragged closer to the hell Ronan Reed had prepared for her. One of the bodyguards was on the phone, his voice thick with triumph as he said they had her and were on the way to the meeting point and would arrive. Evelyn closed her eyes, trying not to imagine what awaited her. She had once believed that life in the Kingsley mansion was hell, and now she understood it had only been the opening act. Then everything happened at once. The car slammed to a sudden stop, tires screeching against the pavement, and Evelyn was thrown forward, her head striking the back of the front seat. The driver cursed, and through the narrow gap between the seats, Evelyn saw a line of black vehicles blocking the road, headlights blazing like demonic eyes in the night. Doors opened, and men stepped out with guns in hand, moving with the precise efficiency of those long accustomed to violence. And standing among them, taller than the rest, dressed in a black coat with steel-gray eyes cold as iron, was Barrett Hale. "Get out of the car." His voice carried through the night, not loud but commanding. Ronan's bodyguards exchanged glances, trying to assess their odds. One of them drew his gun, but before he could raise it, a shot rang out. Evelyn screamed through the gag as the man collapsed, blood pouring from his shoulder. Barrett lowered his weapon, smoke still drifting from the barrel, and said calmly that it was the shoulder and that the next shot would be the head, ordering them out of the car now. The remaining guard didn't need a third warning. He opened the door, raised his hands, and stepped out on shaking legs. Barrett's men quickly restrained both of them, while Barrett himself walked to the car, opened the back door, and saw Evelyn for a brief instant. The steel in his eyes shifted, the cold vanished, the indifference disappeared, replaced by something dangerous and burning before it was swiftly concealed. Barrett bent down, gently removed the gag from Evelyn's mouth, then cut the bindings around her wrists with a small knife. She was safe now, he said, his voice softer, telling her he had her. Evelyn couldn't speak. She only looked at him as tears kept falling, and when he reached out his hand, she grabbed it as if it were the only lifeline in open water. Barrett helped her out of the car, and when her legs trembled too much to hold her, he slipped an arm around her and lifted her as though she weighed nothing. He ordered his men to take the 2 bodyguards to the warehouse and said he would deal with them later. Never taking his eyes off Evelyn, he carried her to his car, settled her into the back seat, then got in beside her. The car surged forward into the night, and Evelyn realized she was shaking violently, not from cold, but from shock, fear, relief, and the collision of countless emotions inside her. A warm coat was draped over her shoulders. She looked up into Barrett's eyes and asked why, her voice, why he had saved her. He didn't answer right away, staring out the window with his jaw clenched as if weighing the truth. Finally, he said it was because he had promised, and because he wasn't the kind of man who abandoned what belonged to him. Evelyn wanted to say she didn't belong to anyone, but that night in that car, wrapped in the warmth of his coat that still carried his scent, she didn't have the strength to argue. They reached Manhattan as dawn began to break. The car stopped in front of a luxurious high-rise, and Barrett took Evelyn up to the penthouse at the very top. The apartment was vast, with glass walls overlooking the Manhattan skyline, but Evelyn had no strength left to take it in. She was exhausted physically and emotionally. A woman was waiting, Dr. Lena Kim, and said she would examine Evelyn. Dr. Lena led Evelyn into a private room and gently asked her to change for the examination. And when Evelyn removed the coat, when the bruises on her arms were revealed, when the burn scar on her shoulder was exposed, when Dr. Lena saw the signs of prolonged malnutrition, of sleepless nights, of years of abuse etched into Evelyn's body, the woman had to turn away for a moment to compose herself. After the examination, Dr. Lena stepped outside where Barrett was waiting, his expression taut with tension. Evelyn couldn't hear what they said, but through the crack in the door, she saw the way Barrett's jaw tightened, the way his hands trembled, the way his steel-gray eyes darkened with a cold fury more terrifying than any shout. And she knew that whatever Dr. Lena had told him, it had changed something in him, in the way he looked at her, and in the battle she hadn't known she'd become the center of. The first days in Barrett Hale's penthouse passed like a strange dream that Evelyn wasn't sure she wanted to wake from. The apartment was larger than the entire first floor of the Kingsley mansion, with polished wooden floors, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Manhattan skyline, and furnishings she knew must have cost more than years of her wages. She was given her own bedroom and her own bathroom, with a bed so soft she almost couldn't sleep the first night because her body wasn't used to it. But the luxury came with rules. She wasn't allowed to leave the penthouse without an escort. She wasn't allowed to contact anyone from her old life. She wasn't allowed to step onto the balcony alone at night. Everything she needed would be provided. But she had to ask first. Barrett explained that it was for her safety. Ronan Reed was still out there, furious at having lost what he believed already belonged to him. And until the situation was resolved, Evelyn needed protection. She understood, she truly did. But understanding didn't stop the suffocating feeling. She had escaped one cage only to step into another, even if this one was gilded and lined with velvet. On the day when a servant brought breakfast to her room, Evelyn refused it. She went down to the kitchen, searched through the massive refrigerator, and made herself a simple meal: fried eggs, toast, a cup of black coffee. Nothing elaborate, but it was something she made herself with her own hands, and that mattered more than any lavish spread. Barrett found her washing dishes when he returned from a meeting. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a long moment, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "You don't have to do that," he finally said. "I have staff." Evelyn didn't turn around. "I know, but I want to. I'm not used to sitting idle." "Is there something wrong with letting others take care of you?" Barrett asked. And there was something in his voice Evelyn couldn't quite define. "Nothing is wrong with it," she said, setting the last plate on the rack before turning to face him. "But I've lived years with my own hands. I don't know how to live any other way, and I don't want to owe anyone anything, including you." Barrett tilted his head, studying her as if she were a strange creature he'd never encountered before. "You're not like the others," he said. "What others?" Evelyn asked. "The ones who want something from me," Barrett replied. "The ones who seize any chance to climb higher. The ones who see money and power and forget who they used to be." Evelyn gave a humorless smile. "I have nothing to lose. Mr. Hale, I hit bottom a long time ago. Your money and power can't buy me because I have nothing to sell." From that moment, a strange routine formed. Evelyn woke early every day, cooked breakfast for herself and sometimes for Barrett if he was home. She cleaned her own room, washed her own clothes, and refused every offer of shopping or spending his money. She found a small corner of the penthouse with good light and began drawing again, simple pencil sketches on paper she asked for from Barrett's office. He watched her day after day with growing curiosity. She didn't demand gifts. She didn't try to seduce him. She didn't flatter or ingratiate herself. She simply lived quietly and stubbornly like a wildflower growing through a crack in concrete. One evening, Declan Voss, Barrett's right-hand man, stopped by the penthouse to report on business. He was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too much of life. When Evelyn passed through the living room carrying a cup of tea, she nodded politely to Declan and disappeared into her room. Declan watched her go, then turned to Barrett with a serious expression. "Boss, I need to be honest with you." "Go on," Barrett said, his gaze still fixed on the door that had just closed. "She's changing you," Declan said, his voice lowering. "I followed you. I've never seen you like this. You canceled meetings to come home earlier. You don't kill with your eyes anymore. You even smile, a real smile, not the kind you give before killing someone." Barrett was silent for a long time. "And that's a problem?" he asked. "Not a problem," Declan shook his head, "but it's dangerous. In this world, feelings are weaknesses. Weaknesses get exploited by enemies. If Ronan Reed learns how important she is to you, he'll use her to destroy you." Barrett stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city glittering below. He knew Declan was right. He knew he was stepping into dangerous territory. But when he thought of Evelyn's eyes, of the way she looked at him without fear, of the way she refused to be bought by anything, he couldn't force himself to turn back. "Maybe she is changing me," Barrett finally admitted, his voice light as the wind. "The question is whether that's really a bad thing." That night, Barrett returned to the penthouse later than usual, and for the first time since Evelyn arrived, she saw him not entirely clear-headed, not drunk enough to collapse, but enough that his steps were slightly unsteady, enough that the steel gray in his eyes was softened, enough that the cold wall he always kept in place showed faint cracks. Evelyn was sitting in the living room reading when he walked in. She was about to stand and give him privacy, but Barrett sat down in the chair across from her, a glass of whiskey still in his hand. "Today is the anniversary of my father's death," he said without looking at her, his gaze fixed on the empty space ahead. Evelyn closed her book and said nothing, simply listening because she understood that silence could be the greatest gift one person could give another. "My father believed in honor," Barrett continued, his voice sinking under the weight of pain buried for too long. "He believed that even in this world among killers and criminals, loyalty could still exist. He believed in his own brother, Uncle Harlan, the man he shared his empire with, his secrets, everything." He stopped, drained the whiskey in one swallow, and set the glass down with a sharp sound. "Uncle Harlan sold my father out to a rival family. They ambushed him right in front of our house. And I was there, standing on the front steps, watching my father take bullets. Bullets. I counted everyone, and I could do nothing but stand there, young, not even knowing how to hold a gun properly, watching the man I respected most collapse in his own blood." Evelyn felt her heart tighten. She looked at the man before her, the most powerful mafia boss in New York, the one the entire city feared, and for the first time, she saw the boy still hidden somewhere inside him, the boy who lost everything in a single night and was forced to carry the world on his shoulders. From that day on, I swore I would never trust anyone again, Barrett said, his voice rough. Feelings are weakness. Weakness gets people killed. I lived by that rule until you showed up with wrinkled dollars and a crazy proposal. Evelyn didn't know what to say. She sat there in the heavy air of secrets and pain and realized that she wasn't the only one carrying scars. I lost my parents in one night too, she finally said, her voice light as breath. I was young. There was a fire, and for years Aunt Helena used that night to control me. She told me people would think I caused it, that I killed my parents, that if I didn't obey, she would let that truth come out. Barrett looked at her, and in his eyes was an understanding Evelyn had never received from anyone. You didn't cause it. No. Evelyn shook her head as tears began to fall despite her effort to hold them back. But I tried to go back and save them. The window was burning, and I still tried to climb up. That's when I got burned. She lifted her hand to her left shoulder where the scar lay hidden beneath her clothes. This scar is the only thing I have left from that night. And Clara and Aunt Helena, they always said it was ugly. They said no one would ever want a girl with a ruined body like mine. Barrett stood slowly and moved closer. He sat down beside her on the sofa, closer than he had ever been before, and Evelyn could smell the whiskey on his breath, the faint scent of sandalwood from his clothes. "Show me," he said, his voice strangely gentle. Evelyn hesitated. She had never let anyone see that scar except Dr. Lena. It was her shame, the proof of imperfection she'd been taught to hide. But there was something in Barrett's eyes that night, something real and vulnerable that made her pull her collar aside and reveal the wrinkled, discolored, uneven skin on her left shoulder. Barrett studied the scar for a long moment, and Evelyn braced herself for disgust, for pity, for the reactions she had known all her life. Instead, he raised his hand and his fingers, the fingers that had held guns, taken lives, built an empire, touched her scar with a gentleness reserved for something precious. "This isn't ugly," Barrett said, his voice low and certain. "This is proof that you love them. This is proof that you were willing to die for the people you loved, and anyone who told you that was shameful is the one who should be ashamed." Evelyn cried. She couldn't stop anymore. For years, she had carried this scar like a curse, and for the first time, someone saw it as a medal. Barrett didn't say anything else. He just sat there, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, letting her cry, letting her release what she had held inside for too long. And when Evelyn finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen, she realized the distance between them had closed so much that she could feel his breath against her cheek. They didn't kiss that night. They simply sat together, two broken souls finding comfort in each other's darkness, until dawn slipped through the curtains and the real world demanded they return to their roles. A week after the night they shared their scars, everything collapsed. Evelyn was sitting by the window drawing when Barrett entered the penthouse with a face darkened like an approaching storm. He didn't say a word. He turned on the television and switched to the local news channel. On the screen, a small diner was engulfed in flames, thick black smoke twisting into the night sky, fire trucks and ambulances surrounding the scene. Evelyn recognized it instantly. It was Martha's diner, the place where she had worked night shifts, where Martha always saved leftover food for her at the end of the day, where Evelyn had once felt that she mattered, even if only a little. "No," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. No, Martha is critically injured," Barrett said, his voice stretched tight like a wire about to snap. "Burns over more than half her body. She's in emergency surgery. They don't know if she'll survive." Evelyn felt her knees give way. She sank onto the floor, tears pouring down, and only one question spun endlessly in her mind. "Why? Why Martha?" "Because of you," Barrett replied, and he threw an envelope onto the floor in front of her. This was left at the scene. Evelyn picked it up with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph of her taken secretly while she was working at the diner, and a scrap of paper with messy handwriting. "Anyone close to you is cursed. Who's next? The old butler or Hale himself? At the bottom was a stylized letter. R. Reed. This is a declaration of war, Barrett said, and when Evelyn looked up at him, she saw his steel-gray eyes burning with a cold fire more terrifying than rage. He thinks he can touch what's mine and walk away. He's wrong. Declan is gathering the men. Tonight, we strike back. Evelyn stood, wiped her tears, and stepped in front of Barrett. No, she said, her voice shaking but firm. You can't do that. What did you just say? Barrett asked, his eyes narrowing. I said you can't do that, Evelyn repeated. If you attack Ronan tonight, there will be war. War means blood. Your people, his people, innocent people caught in between. How many will die because of me? He hurt Martha, Barrett growled, stepping closer. You think I'm going to let that go? Ronan Reed needs to learn there are things he's not allowed to touch, and he needs to learn it in blood. Then let me go, Evelyn said, and she felt Barrett freeze. If I'm the reason for all this, then let me leave. I'll disappear. Ronan won't have any reason to come after you or anyone connected to me anymore. I'm used to disappearing. I'm good at it. Barrett looked at her, and something in his eyes shattered. He moved so fast Evelyn couldn't react, his hands closing around her arms, not rough, but unyielding. You think I'll let you go? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. You think after everything that's happened, I'll let you walk out that door and vanish? I'm not your prisoner? Evelyn said, forcing her voice steady while her heart raced. You said I wasn't a prisoner. That means I have the right to leave. You're not a prisoner, Barrett agreed, pulling her closer, so close she could feel his heated breath on her lips. But you're not a stranger either. You're someone I would burn this entire world to protect. And if you think I'll let you go just because you want to sacrifice yourself like some saint, you're wrong. I don't need you to protect me, Evelyn said, but her voice weakened. I do, Barrett replied. I need to protect you, not because you're weak, but because for the first time, I found something worth protecting besides that damn empire. And then he kissed her, not gently, not romantically. This was fierce, desperate, full of anger and pent-up hunger. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like if he let go, she would disappear. Like this was the last time he would ever be allowed to touch her. Evelyn kissed him back. She didn't know why or when it began, but she returned that kiss with everything she had, with the loneliness, with the longing to belong somewhere, with the strange realization that in the arms of the most ruthless mafia boss in the city, she felt safer than she ever had anywhere else. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, foreheads touching, and the outside world with Ronan Reed, with war, with blood and fire, no longer seemed to matter. I won't let you go, Barrett whispered, and I won't start a war tonight, but Ronan Reed will pay, my way on my time. Evelyn nodded, knowing that whether she wanted it or not, she was now bound to this man in a way that could never be undone. Days after that kiss, the first message arrived. Evelyn was alone in the penthouse when the phone Barrett had bought for her began to vibrate, an unknown number. She was about to ignore it when a second message appeared. Eve, this is Clara. Please don't block this number. I need to talk to you. Evelyn's chest tightened. She stared at that name, the name tied to so many years of humiliation, mockery, and being treated like trash. Her finger moved toward the block button, but a third message arrived before she could press it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just found out the truth about Mom and Ronan, about what they did to you. I'm terrified. Eve, I don't know what to do. Evelyn read the words again and again, part of her, the part that had been hurt too many times, screamed that this was a trap. But another part, the part that still believed in blood, the part that still longed for some fragment of family, whispered that maybe Clara had changed. Maybe after learning the truth about Ronan, she'd finally realized how wrong she had been. Evelyn didn't reply right away. She waited until Barrett came home, planning to tell him, but he walked in looking exhausted after a long day dealing with the fallout from the diner fire. He kissed her forehead, asked if she was all right, then went straight into his study to continue his calls. Evelyn watched the door close and decided to say nothing. Not yet. She needed to know what Clara wanted first. Over the next days, the messages kept coming. Clara said she had called off the engagement with Ronan after discovering who he really was. She said Aunt Helena was furious and threatening to cut her out of the inheritance. She said that for the first time in her life, she understood what Evelyn had endured. She begged for one chance to apologize in person. Just you and me, no one else. There's a small cafe in Brooklyn near Prospect Park. I'll wait for you there. Please, Eve, I need you. Evelyn knew she shouldn't go. She knew this reeked of a trap, but she also remembered Clara's eyes in old photographs when they were children. Before envy and cruelty took root, she remembered the cousin who once shared a piece of candy with her when they were young. Before Aunt Helena taught Clara that Evelyn was something to be taken from, maybe that cousin was still somewhere inside her. The day came, and Evelyn slipped out of the penthouse while Barrett was away. She left a note saying she needed some fresh air and would be back before evening. She wore a hooded coat, dark sunglasses, and took a taxi to Brooklyn like any ordinary person. The cafe was small and warm, tucked into a quiet alley just steps from the park. Evelyn looked through the window and saw Clara sitting alone inside, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, her face pale and anxious. She truly looked afraid. Evelyn pushed the door open and stepped in. Clara looked up, her eyes filling with tears, and stood as if to embrace her. "Eve, you came. I was afraid you wouldn't." Evelyn stopped a few steps away, her instincts still on high alert. "What do you want to say?" she asked cautiously. Clara opened her mouth to answer, but at that moment the back door of the cafe burst open. Two large men walked in, and Evelyn recognized them instantly, Ronan's bodyguards, the ones who had tried to kidnap her that night. She turned to run, but the front door was already blocked. Ronan Reed entered, a smile on his lips as cold as a blade. "Thank you, Clara," he said without even looking at his former fiancé. "You did very well." Evelyn turned to Clara and saw everything she needed to see in her cousin's eyes. No remorse, no fear, only the cold satisfaction of someone who had just completed a transaction. "I'm sorry, Eve," Clara said, but there was no apology in her voice. "You took Ronan from me. I'm just taking back what belongs to me." Evelyn didn't have time to scream. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind, and the familiar chemical stench filled her nose. The world tilted, and the last thing she heard before darkness swallowed her was Ronan's whisper in her ear. "This time, no one is coming to save you." Evelyn woke up in darkness. The smell of dampness and rust burned her lungs, mixed with the metallic stench of blood that she couldn't tell was hers or someone else's. She was lying on freezing concrete, her hands bound behind her back, and when she tried to sit up, pain exploded through her body so violently she almost blacked out again. A warehouse. She realized she was in an abandoned warehouse, the only light coming from a few flickering ceiling bulbs and moonlight leaking through shattered high windows. Rusted steel pillars stood like enormous skeletons, and somewhere in the darkness, water dripped steadily, like a countdown she couldn't stop. "Look who finally woke up." Ronan's voice came from behind her, and she heard his footsteps closing in. He stepped into her view, white shirt sleeves rolled up, a smile on his lips, but eyes cold as a corpse. In his hand was a metal rod. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time," he said, squatting in front of her. "Ever since that Thanksgiving night when you dragged Hale in and humiliated me in front of everyone. Who do you think you are? A servant girl, a burden no one wants, and you dared to look down on Ronan Reed." Evelyn didn't answer. She just looked at him with eyes that no longer held fear. She had lived through too much to be afraid of a man like him. Her silence enraged him. He stood and the first kick slammed into her stomach, folding her over as bile rose in her throat. Then the second blow, the third, fists, boots, the metal rod. Ronan didn't rush. He hurt her methodically, each strike calculated to inflict maximum pain without killing her. He wanted her conscious. He wanted her to feel every second. "Beg," he roared after a blow to her ribs that produced a sickening crack. "Cry, scream, beg me to stop." But Evelyn didn't. She lay on the icy concrete, blood running from the corner of her mouth, from the cut on her forehead, from dozens of bruises blooming beneath her skin, and she didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just looked at him with eyes that had witnessed too much suffering, eyes that had learned endurance as a child watching her home burn to the ground. "You think staying silent makes me respect you?" Ronan hissed, grabbing her hair and yanking her head back. "You think being stubborn will make me give up? I'll break you. I'll make you kneel." "You can do whatever you want to my body," Evelyn finally said, her voice weak but strangely steady. "But you'll never break me. I lived years in a hell you can't even imagine. You think a few blows will make me afraid." Ronan's face warped. Not anger anymore, pure rage. The madness of someone whose deepest insecurity had been exposed. He howled like a wounded animal. And the next blow was so powerful. Evelyn heard another rib crack. The world tilted. Darkness crept into the edges of her vision, and the last thing she thought before losing consciousness was Barrett's steel gray eyes. She hoped, no matter how irrational, that he would find her, and if he didn't, she hoped he knew she had no regrets. No regret about that. Thanksgiving night. No regret about the $200. No regret about anything at all. Barrett Hale knew something was wrong the moment he stepped into the penthouse and didn't smell the familiar coffee. Evelyn always brewed every afternoon. The apartment was unnaturally silent, and the note on the kitchen counter made his chest tighten. "Need some fresh air. I'll be back before evening." He checked his watch. Evening. She'd been gone with no calls, no messages. Evelyn wasn't the kind of woman who disappeared without a word. "Declan," he called out, his voice sharp as a blade. Declan Voss appeared immediately, his face tense the instant he saw his boss's expression. "Track her phone, now." Declan nodded and disappeared into the study. Minutes later, he was back, and the news froze the blood in Barrett's veins. "Her phone is in Brooklyn, Prospect Park area, but boss, it hasn't moved." Barrett didn't need to hear anything else. He knew, with the instinct of a man who had lived too long in the dark, that Evelyn was in danger. "Mobilize everyone," he ordered, his voice terrifyingly calm, the calm of a storm before it destroys everything. "I want every source, every security camera, every set of eyes on the street looking for her. I want to know who she met, where she went, and who took her, and I want answers." The Mafia machine of Barrett Hale moved like a perfectly oiled weapon. Within time, they identified that Evelyn had entered a small cafe in Brooklyn. Nearby security footage showed her walking in alone and never coming back out. Time later, a low-level thug tied to the Reed network broke under pressure and confessed that Ronan had taken a woman to an abandoned warehouse in Newark, New Jersey. Time after that, they had the exact address. Barrett stood in the penthouse living room, surrounded by his most loyal men, all armed to the teeth. He checked his gun, chambered around, and when he looked up, his gray eyes were no longer steel. They were hell. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice low and lethal. "Ronan Reed, and anyone who stands between me and her dies tonight. No negotiations, no prisoners. I want her alive. Everything else is irrelevant." The convoy of black vehicles tore through the New York night, crossed the George Washington Bridge, and plunged into New Jersey. Barrett sat in the back seat in silence. But Declan, who had followed him, could feel the fury boiling beneath that controlled surface. He had never seen Barrett like this, never seen his boss's hands shake for anything other than rage. They reached the warehouse at night. The building squatted in the middle of an abandoned industrial zone with only a few weak lights glowing inside. Ronan's guards were stationed outside, men, armed but careless, convinced no one would dare challenge Reed territory. They were wrong. Barrett didn't wait for orders or a perfect plan. He stepped out of the car, moved through the darkness like the darkness itself, and before the first guard could shout a warning, a bullet tore through his skull. Chaos exploded. Gunfire ripped through the night. Screams echoed. Glass shattered. Doors were kicked in. Barrett's men surged forward like a tidal wave, and he led them, fearless, relentless, his gun firing with cold, deadly precision. The guards outside were down. More inside tried to fight back and died before they even understood what was happening. Barrett stepped over their bodies without looking down, his eyes cutting through the shadows, searching for only one thing, Evelyn. And when he kicked open the final door, when he saw her lying motionless on the blood-soaked concrete, when he saw Ronan Reed standing beside her with a metal rod in his hand, Barrett Hale finally released every restraint he had left. Hell had been unleashed, and it bore his name. Ronan reacted faster than Barrett had anticipated, because the moment the door was kicked open, he lunged for Evelyn, yanking her up like a human shield and pressing a gleaming blade against her throat. Evelyn groaned as she was dragged upright, her battered body screaming in pain. But her eyes opened, and when she saw Barrett standing in the doorway, relief hit her so hard she nearly cried. He came. He really came. "Stop right there, Hale," Ronan roared, forcing the blade tighter against Evelyn's neck until a thin line of blood appeared. "Take one more step, and she dies." Barrett froze mid-stride, his gaze moving from Evelyn's bruised face to the knife at her throat, then to Ronan's unhinged expression. He knew he could shoot, trusted his aim completely, but the risk was too great. One tremor, one wrong angle, and Evelyn would be dead. "Let her go," Barrett said, his voice terrifyingly calm despite the storm raging inside him. "This is between you and me. Reed, she has nothing to do with it." Ronan laughed, the feral sound of a man with nothing left to lose. "Nothing to do with it. She's the reason all of this happened. She's the reason you destroyed my empire, killed my men, took everything I built, and you say she has nothing to do with it." Barrett lowered his gun slowly, in a gesture of surrender that Declan, standing behind him, never thought he would witness. "Fine. What do you want?" "I want you dead," Ronan hissed. "But first, I want you on your knees. I want you, Barrett Hale, the great boss, kneeling in front of me, begging me to spare the life of your little—" Barrett didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees. Declan and the others stared in shock. The most powerful Mafia boss in New York, a man who had never bowed to anyone, was kneeling on the filthy concrete of an abandoned warehouse. For a woman. "Let her go," Barrett said evenly. "You wanted me to kneel. I'm kneeling now. Let her go." Ronan looked down at him with a mix of triumph and madness. "You know, Hale, I always thought you were strong. I was always afraid of you, but look at you now, kneeling like a dog for a servant girl with nothing but an ugly scar." He laughed. "Love really does turn people weak." While Ronan reveled in his victory, he didn't notice Evelyn. She stayed limp in his grip, silent, but her eyes were open, watching, calculating. She saw Barrett on his knees, for her. She saw the pain in his eyes, the desperation he was trying to hide, and she knew she couldn't let him die here, not for her. To tear flesh from bone. Ronan screamed and bit down on the hand holding the knife, biting hard, deep, savage, as if she meant to tear flesh from bone. Ronan screamed and jerked his hand back on instinct, the blade leaving her throat for a split second. A split second was all Barrett needed. He surged forward, but Ronan was fast too. He stabbed blindly, the blade driving through Barrett's shoulder at the exact moment Barrett fired. The gunshot exploded in the confined space. Ronan Reed reeled backward, a bullet hole in the center of his chest, His eyes wide with disbelief, as if he couldn't accept that he had truly lost. He collapsed, and this time he didn't get up. Barrett staggered, blood pouring from his shoulder, but he didn't care. He crawled to Evelyn, who had fallen to the floor when Ronan released her. She lay there, eyes closed, her face frighteningly pale, and for one horrifying moment, Barrett thought she was dead. "Eve," he said, his voice breaking for the first time since his father died. "Eve, open your eyes. Look at me, please." Her eyes fluttered open, and when they found him, she smiled, a small, blood-streaked, honest smile. "You came," she whispered. "I told you," he replied, his voice shaking as he pulled her into his arms, ignoring his own wound. "I'll always come." Declan rushed over, shouting for medics, for cars, for anyone who could help. Barrett felt the world begin to blur from blood loss. But he didn't let go of Evelyn. He held her tighter, as if releasing her would mean losing her forever. That's how the rescue team found them. The most ruthless mafia boss in New York and the girl with $200, both soaked in blood, both fading, yet refusing to let go of each other. Declan would later say that even after Barrett lost consciousness, his hand was still locked around Evelyn's, as if even in the dark, he refused to let her go. Weeks passed inside the private hospital Barrett owned under a false name. Evelyn woke after days in a coma with broken ribs, a mild concussion, and countless bruises covering her body. Barrett woke before her, and the first thing he did once he could stand was drag himself to her room, sit beside her bed, and refuse to leave until she opened her eyes. The days that followed were slow and painful, but they were also the most peaceful Evelyn had ever known. She lay in the hospital bed while Barrett sat beside her reading or working on his laptop, and they didn't need many words. Each other's presence was enough. But peace never lasts. After Evelyn was able to sit up, FBI Special Agent Harlan Vance appeared in her hospital room with an offer. Ronan Reed was dead, but his network wasn't. His accomplices were still out there. And if Evelyn was willing to testify about what she knew, about the plan to sell her, about Aunt Helena's and Clara's roles, the FBI could put them all in prison, including Aunt Helena and Clara. Evelyn listened in silence, her eyes fixed on the window where the New York sky hung gray and heavy, matching her mood. She knew what it meant. Testifying against a criminal organization meant entering the U.S. Marshals Witness Protection Program. It meant disappearing. It meant leaving Barrett. "I need time to think," she told Agent Vance, and he nodded, leaving his business card behind. That night, Evelyn told Barrett about the FBI's offer. She told him everything without hiding a thing, and she watched his face harden when she mentioned witness protection. "You don't have to do this," Barrett said, his voice tight despite his control. "I can protect you. I can handle this my way. Aunt Helena, Clara, the rest of Ronan's people. I can make them all disappear without the FBI." "I know you can," Evelyn said, lifting her hand to touch his cheek. "But that's not how I want to live." He looked at her, gray eyes full of pain he tried to suppress. "You want to leave?" "I want freedom," Evelyn said softly but firmly. "Not freedom from you, freedom from my past. For years, I lived in fear. Fear of Aunt Helena. Fear of the secret about the fire. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of not deserving love. If I let you solve everything in the shadows, I'll always be the girl who needs to be rescued. I don't want that anymore. I want to stand on my own, face the people who destroyed my life, and take back justice myself, even if it means leaving you." Turned back, his eyes still hurt, but they're turned back, his eyes still hurt, but there was respect there too. "I don't agree," he said. "I think this is a dangerous mistake. I think you're putting yourself at unnecessary risk, but I respect your right to decide your own life, and if this is what you need to be truly free, I won't stop you." He walked back, sat on the edge of her bed, and took her hand. "But you have to promise me one thing." Evelyn looked at him, her heart racing. "What?" "Promise you'll come back," Barrett said, his voice rough. "Promise that when it's over, when you're free, you'll come back to me. I'll wait no matter how long, but you have to come back." Evelyn smiled through her tears. She leaned forward and kissed him softly, a kiss full of promise. "I'll come back," she whispered. "Wait for me." A week later, Evelyn signed the cooperation papers with the FBI. She gave them everything she knew about Ronan Reed's network, about the plan to sell her, about Aunt Helena's and Clara's roles. She told them about years of abuse, about her parents' insurance money being stolen, about every crime the Kingsley family had hidden. The night before she entered witness protection, Barrett came to see her one last time. They didn't say much. They just held each other in the safe room the FBI had arranged, and Evelyn felt his heart beating against her chest. She memorized every moment, every breath, every sensation because she didn't know how long it would be before she saw him again. When dawn came and Agent Vance knocked on the door, Barrett finally let her go. "Don't forget me," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes weren't. Evelyn stood at the door and looked back at him one last time. "Never," she replied. Then she walked away without looking back because she knew if she did, she wouldn't be able to leave. But she carried his image in her heart like a light in the dark, like a promise that no matter what happened, one day she would find her way home. Months in the witness protection program were the longest months of Evelyn's life. She was relocated to a small town in Montana, living under a new name, working in an old bookstore. And every night she dreamed of steel gray eyes. She wasn't allowed to contact anyone from her former life, including Barrett, and the loneliness sometimes nearly crushed her. But she didn't give up. She spent her time preparing for the trial, working with FBI attorneys, reviewing evidence again and again, rehearsing her testimony until she could speak without her voice trembling. She wouldn't let fear control her anymore. Never again. The trial took place at a federal courthouse in Manhattan. Evelyn walked into the courtroom with her head held high, and for the first time, she saw Aunt Helena and Clara. Aunt Helena had aged badly, her face hollow, her eyes burning with hatred as she looked at Evelyn. Clara was different. She was gaunt, her hair unkempt, and when their eyes met, Evelyn saw fear in the eyes that had once been so arrogant. She didn't feel triumph. She only felt sadness that this was the only family she'd ever had, and they had chosen to destroy her instead of loving her. Evelyn was called to the witness stand. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and when she sat facing the courtroom, she saw a familiar face in the back row, Barrett Hale, in a perfectly tailored black suit, his gray eyes never leaving her for a single second. He came, even knowing that appearing here was a risk, even knowing the FBI was watching his every move. He came so she'd know she wasn't alone. Evelyn took a deep breath and began. She told them about the fire, about losing her parents, about how Aunt Helena took her in along with the insurance money. She told them about years of being treated like a servant, of having every dollar she earned taken from her, of daily humiliation and psychological abuse. She told them about Ronan Reed, about the plan to sell her, about the night she was kidnapped and tortured in a warehouse in New Jersey. But the turning point came when the prosecutor presented new evidence the FBI had uncovered during the investigation into Ronan's operation. The fire hadn't been an accident. Evelyn's father had owed money to a small gang connected to the Reed family, and when he couldn't pay, they burned his house to make an example. This wasn't an electrical failure, it was murder, and Aunt Helena had known the truth. Evelyn heard it like a punch to the gut. She'd always suspected something was wrong about that night, but hearing official confirmation was different. Her parents didn't die in an accident, they were murdered, and the woman who took her in, who used that night as a weapon to control her, had known the truth from the beginning. On the stand, Aunt Helena was questioned about what she knew, for the first time in Evelyn's life. Aunt Helena couldn't lie her way out. The evidence was overwhelming, emails, messages. Recorded calls showed that she not only knew about the murder, but used that knowledge to keep Evelyn under her control, threatening to frame her if she ever resisted. She stole Evelyn's childhood, stole her parents' money, stole years of her life, all while knowing her parents had been murdered and their killers had walked free. The trial lasted every day. Evelyn sat there listening to testimony, evidence, and the desperate defenses of Aunt Helena and Clara, and every day she felt another piece of the weight she'd carried being lifted from her shoulders. In the end, the jury returned its verdict. Aunt Helena Kingsley was convicted of conspiracy, financial fraud, and child abuse, years in federal prison without parole. Clara Kingsley was convicted as an accomplice to kidnapping and aggravated assault, years in prison. When the judge struck the gavel, Evelyn didn't cry, she didn't smile. She just sat there feeling the weight of justice, and for the first time, she felt truly free. After the trial, she stepped out of the courthouse into bright spring sunlight. Reporters surrounded her, flashes going off everywhere. But Evelyn didn't see any of it. She only saw a black car parked at the curb and the man leaning against it, gray eyes searching for her in the crowd. She walked toward him, her steps quickening until she ran, until she crashed into his arms, and Barrett held her like he'd never let go again. "I came back," she whispered against his chest. "I know," he replied, kissing her hair. "I waited." A year has passed since that defining trial, and Evelyn Sinclair's life has changed in ways she never dared to dream of. She stands inside her small flower shop in Brooklyn, arranging white roses in a glass vase, while the sunlight pours through the window and settles gently across her face, carrying a sense of peace she once believed she would never know. The shop is called Sinclair Blooms, a name she chose to honor her parents, who were finally vindicated after years. She designed every corner herself, cared for every plant with her own hands, and when customers walk in, she greets them with the sincere smile of someone who has learned that happiness isn't something others grant you, but something you build yourself. Barrett has changed too. Over the past year, he has steadily restructured his empire, withdrawing from the most dangerous illegal operations and shifting toward legitimate real estate and hotel ventures. Declan Voss likes to complain that his boss is turning into a respectable businessman, but everyone can see that Barrett has no regrets. He didn't do it because Evelyn forced him to. He did it because he wanted to build a life she could stand beside with pride. They date like ordinary people. They go out to dinner, see movies, take walks through the park on quiet weekend afternoons. Evelyn teaches Barrett how to care for flowers, and he surprises himself by truly enjoying it, enjoying the act of creating something beautiful instead of destroying it. Barrett teaches Evelyn how to trust again, how to let someone into the darkest corners of her soul without fear of judgment. They heal each other slowly and patiently, like two wounds closing together. One autumn afternoon, as Evelyn is tidying the shop after closing, the bell above the door rings. She turns and sees Barrett standing there in his familiar black suit, but there's something different in his eyes, a nervousness she has never seen in the man who once made all of New York tremble. He steps forward without a word, stands in the middle of her small flower shop among roses and daisies and ferns, and he kneels. Evelyn lifts a hand to cover her mouth, tears spilling before he even speaks. "I'm not a good man," Barrett says, his voice low and honest. "I still have darkness inside me. I still have parts of me that may never be fully light. But when I'm with you, I want to be better. You make me believe I can be redeemed." He takes out a small box, inside a simple yet elegant ring, not a large flashy diamond, but a small blue stone, the color of the sky on the clearest days. "Evelyn Sinclair, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispers through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000,000 times, yes." The wedding takes place a month later, small and warm, just as they wanted. Only Declan is there. Dr. Lena Harlan, the retired butler, who still comes to bless the girl he always treated like his own granddaughter, and a few other close souls, Evelyn wears a simple white dress and carries a bouquet she made herself, and as she stands beside Barrett before the priest, she knows she has finally found home. On their wedding night, they stand on the penthouse balcony overlooking the glittering city of New York below. Evelyn leans against her husband's shoulder, feeling his warmth and steady presence. The girl who hired a fake boyfriend for $200 has come a long way, she says with a smile. Barrett turns to her, and for the first time since they met, she sees him smile freely without armor or restraint. She didn't go anywhere, he says. She just found her way home. And it's true. Evelyn Sinclair, the orphaned girl who once learned to make herself invisible just to survive, has finally found where she belongs, not because Barrett saved her, but because she saved herself. And along the way, she found someone willing to walk beside her. This isn't a fairy tale. There's no perfect prince, no miracle that changes a life overnight. This is the story of an ordinary woman who learned to stand up after being knocked down, who learned to love herself after being taught she wasn't worthy, who learned to trust again after being betrayed too many times. The lesson Evelyn leaves us with is that dignity isn't something others give or take away. It lives in how we treat ourselves, in how we refuse to let others define our worth, in how we choose to rise no matter how many times life knocks us down. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, like and share, so more people can hear stories filled with emotion like this every day. How do you feel about Evelyn and Barrett's journey? Did it remind you of something in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly want to hear what's in your heart. We wish all of you watching good health, a joyful life, and peace each day. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.